A wizard is never late, Frodo Baggins. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.
Hello and welcome to The Broken Sword, your YouTube home for The Lord of the Rings and all things J.R.R. Tolkien. In today's video we look at the legendary wizard, Gandalf, and what makes him so great.
Build me an army worthy of Mordor.
First things first, do not forget to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel so that you can join the ever-growing Brohirrim. So, of the Istari, there were 5, and of those 5, the fate of only 3 is known with any certainty. Arriving with the other 4, and last of these, Gandalf arrived in Middle-earth in the Third Age. He is well met by a certain Círdan the Shipwright, the bearded elf himself. So taken with Gandalf, the ancient being gives him one of the 3 elven rings of power, Narya, telling him that he will have need of it. "Take this ring, master," he said, "for your labours will be heavy, but it will support you in the weariness that you will have taken upon yourself. For this is the Ring of Fire, and with it you may rekindle hearts in a world that grows chill. But as for me, my heart is with the sea, and I will dwell by the grey shores until the last ship sails. I will await you." The Great Grey Pilgrim, one of the most popular fictional characters of the 20th century. Gandalf the Grey, Olorin, Mithrandir, known by many names over the course of many ages. Gandalf demonstrates his power in more subtle ways than we see from other literary wizards. To give full context to the previous quotation from The Lord of the Rings, it will be good to also look at the Unfinished Tales, as here is a slightly more full account of the incident and its outcome, which is important for later stories. "For," he said, "great labours and perils lie before you, and lest your task prove too great and wearisome, take this ring for your aid and comfort. It was entrusted to me only to keep secret, and here upon the west shores it is idle, but I deem that in days ere long to come it should be in nobler hands than mine, that may wield it for the kindling of all hearts to courage." And the grey messenger took the ring, and kept it ever secret. Yet the white messenger, who was skilled to uncover all secrets, after a time became aware of this gift, and begrudged it, and it was the beginning of the hidden ill will that he bore to the grey, which afterwards became manifest. Gandalf is both ancient and powerful, this much is well known, but to the extent of his power that is shown, much more can be revealed by looking closely at the text and seeing what we can further learn. Of course, the ring Narya, one of the elven 3 rings of power, is fairly well known to have been worn by Gandalf, but less known perhaps would be Gandalf's actual telepathy and the reading of minds. So, let's dive into this. Gandalf has an otherworldly sense of perception, prophetic insight even. It is Gandalf who left the Ring of Barahir with Galadriel in Lothlorien, and he told her that in the right time, the right one would come and he would be named Elessar. And well, that story is one that we do cover fully in our History of the Ring of Barahir video if you want to know more on that. However, what this demonstrates is how Gandalf is able to use foresight to see into future events, just as he was able to prophesize the coming of Aragorn and the changing of his name. He would also see much that would come to pass and be important during the War of the Ring. The importance of hobbits, as well as the confounding and inexplicable role that he foresaw that Gollum had to play. This was crucial in the end, as it is important to remember. Frodo failed. In his mission, he became corrupted by the One Ring at that last moment, and when the time came for him to rid himself of it forever, he claimed it as his own and disappeared. If not for the role Gollum played, tackling him as he did, the world of men in the Fourth Age might have been much bleaker, much darker of a place. As the wielder of the Flame of Anor, you could make the argument that he is a spiritual being composed of fire, the flame imperishable, or the sun, not that same fire of Morgoth or Gothmog, Lord of Balrogs, but of the fire that is the stars, the light of the 2 trees, Talperion and Laurelin, and the light. This is the life-bringing, nourishing warmth of the sun, as we briefly mentioned in our video on the differences between Gandalf the Grey and the reanimated Gandalf the White. But as to focus on his true power here, we have several different categories to look into. His enhanced level of perception allowed him to see the invisible West Gate of Moria when the Fellowship arrived at an apparent rock wall. The moon now shone upon the grey face of the rock, but they could see nothing else for a while. Then slowly on the surface, where the wizard's hands had passed, faint lines appeared, like slender veins of silver running in the stone. At times he is also shown to be able to read minds, in particular the mind of Frodo, though he apologises for doing so upon his waking in Rivendell. In the chapter of many meetings we have. "You have talked long in your sleep, Frodo," said Gandalf gently, "and it has not been hard for me to read your mind and memory." Gandalf admits this is not proper, as he did not have Frodo's permission to do so. Though he inquired only after Frodo's health and well-being, no harm was incurred, nor intended. This gives the impression that there are at least other practitioners of telepathy within Tolkien's Legendarium, and that not everyone capable of this power is as restrained or as polite in using it as Gandalf shows himself to be. There is a lot to distinguish the way Sauron uses his power and how Gandalf uses his strength. Gandalf never uses them to control someone outright, though there could be an argument made that he did just that during his and Bilbo's long conversation after his 111st birthday party. We have instances where Professor Tolkien draws our attention to the fire gleaming in Gandalf's eyes as he speaks and listens to Bilbo. Regardless of working with someone who is not quite themselves, he is able to work through those psychological barriers put up by the One Ring that's trying to keep it out of the hands that it wants to be in. Regardless, this scene mirrors what he later does for Theoden King at Meduseld, while he is similarly under Saruman's power by the way of Wormtongue's poisonous words and, well, his poisonous poisons. In the end though, like Theoden, Bilbo is able to free himself of it and feels so much better immediately, and some warmth and colour comes back to him, and he is inspired.
And he lived happily ever after, to the end of his days.
Inspiring others is a gift, and as a practitioner of inspiration and uplifting others, Gandalf is unrivaled in all of Middle-earth. What Sauron is to manipulation and deceit, Gandalf is to hopefulness and pulling from the depths unknown. Gandalf is a natural leader of men, but seeks not power over them, as he is put forward to lead the White Council, but he refuses the compliment and prefers to do the work without the need for praise or laurels. When sent to Middle-earth, he had the humility to admit his fears and admit weakness to Manwë himself. Manwë replied that he wished Alorin to go as a messenger to Middle-earth, but Alorin declared that he was too weak for such a task, and that he feared Sauron. Then Manwë said that that was all the more reason why he should go, and that he commanded Alorin. In the Silmarillion of the Rings of Power in the Third Age, we learn that Gandalf was able to shapeshift, or at least put on different guises. For though he loved the elves, he walked among them unseen or in form as one of them. The work we have from the Unfinished Tales fleshes this out a bit too. The Maiar were spirits, but capable of self-incarnation and could take humane forms. In addition to telepathy, he shows that he is capable of telekinesis on a number of occasions too. The first might have been when he reappeared as Gandalf the White upon meeting Aragorn, Gimli and Legolas in Fangorn Forest, where he demonstrates this ability in brilliant fashion. He lifted up his staff, and Gimli's axe leaped from his grasp and fell ringing on the ground. The sword of Aragorn, stiff in his motionless hand, blazed with a sudden flame. Legolas gave a great shout and shot an arrow high into the air. It vanished in a flash of flame. Similarly, he is able to disarm Denethor in the Pyre of Denethor Chapter 2. But Gandalf sprang up the steps. The men fell back from him and covered their eyes, for his coming was like the incoming of a white light into a dark place, and he came with great anger. He lifted up his hand, and in the very stroke the sword of Denethor flew up and left his grasp and fell behind him in the shadows of the house, and Denethor stepped backward before Gandalf as one amazed. Gandalf led the Fellowship of the Ring until he was confronted by Durin's Bane at the Bridge of Khazad-dûm, and he took this pass of deciding to go into Moria over Aragorn's explicit disagreement with this route when turned away from the path of Caradhras. And it must be said, Aragorn ran at the Nazgul with sword in hand and torch in other, so this is not a man easily cowed or frightened. In the film though, when they try to pass Caradhras, it is shown to be Saruman who causes this, but in the book, this is more subtle, and more likely that it is Sauron, since Gandalf seems to think that the mountain itself is alive and powerful, and the power required for this kind of spellcasting is beyond Saruman, and Gandalf knew this. He is capable of great spellcasting himself, not merely spells that have marvellous effects and flashing lights. He was partially responsible for the flooding of the Ford of Bruinen, when he transformed the waves of Elrond into certain shapes, sweeping the Nazgul away. But there's another instance too, when the Company of the Ring are encamped. We get a cryptic moment wherein Frodo sees the stars above disappear and a shadow fall over the high heavens. What this is, or whether it was Sauron reaching out for him as he often felt, or if it was the Nazgul disposed of a physical form being summoned back to Mordor, either could be argued. But when Gandalf says it's just a wisp of cloud, a line given to Gimli in the films, it seems to be a deliberate falsehood on Gandalf's part. At all times he had to consider both the physical and mental health of the Ringbearer, and throughout the story we see Gandalf work tirelessly for others, not once for himself, and in doing so gives us insight into what Tolkien thought of leadership, courage, and what it was to be honourable and to be wise. Not only can he wield subtle, perceptual disturbances with his style of magic, he tells us a bit more while stuck at the doors of Durin, where he told his companions, "I once knew every spell in all the tongues of elves or men or orcs that was ever used for such a purpose. I could still remember 10 score of them without searching in my mind." Similarly, he attempts to keep the Balrog from reaching them by barring the door. Frodo thought he could hear the voice of Gandalf above, muttering words that ran down the sloping roof with a sighing echo. He could not catch what was said. The walls seemed to be trembling. Every now and again the drumbeats throbbed and rolled. Doom. Doom. And yet at this point we know that Gandalf is restricted by conscience and the frailties of his flesh. Gandalf was always limited in some form or another, by form of his incarnation, before his death and resurrection. And as Gandalf the White, he was limited still, but by his conscience. Indeed, after he startles the 3 hunters in Fangorn Forest, he is quick to settle their rattled nerves. "Get up, my good Gimli. No blame to you and no harm done to me. Indeed, my friends, none of you have any weapon that could hurt me." "Dangerous," cried Gandalf. "And so am I. Very dangerous. More dangerous than anything you will ever meet unless you are brought alive before the seat of the Dark Lord." What keeps him from being the equal of Sauron ultimately comes down to this restraint, his concern and his love for his friends, their world, and for the future. Sauron acts without restraint, compassion, or moral compunction. He just does whatever he wants and uses his power as he desires. It may be argued that Sauron's glory days were behind him at the time of the Lord of the Rings. Indeed, that he was more formidable and imposing of an enemy in the days of his power and majesty as Lord of the Earth, until he was finally thrown down by the collective might of the Last Alliance. War is foul business, and it involves the loss of friends, of family, and of harmony in the world. It scars and traumatizes the men and women who fight, directly or indirectly, on the front lines or in the hospitals. It is a business of death, and Gandalf we know would do no such business were there any recourse available. Amongst the wisest of the Maiar, and functionally immortal, Gandalf was a great force of good in the Third Age, and in addition to the strengths given him by his rank and nature, he had strength of character. He chose to do what was right, whatever the difficulty. Approaching Gandalf is like how Aragorn and Frodo saw flashes of light in the horizon as they approached Amon Sul, better known as Weathertop. We see flashes of brilliance and of light, and we understand that this is from a greater power than ourselves. But as to the true nature of that power and its source, many say it is the reason for the lightning and the thunderstorm. Also, that Gandalf was able to defeat Durin's Bane is not what made him so strong. It was that he should step in front of his friends to shield them in doing so. As Aragorn ran toward the Nazgul with flame and steel, Gandalf approached a Balrog of Morgoth and attempted to give him fair warning that though his soul belonged to Eru, and well, you know the rest.
You shall not pass!
He is not strong because he could do these things. He is strong because he did them. So there we have it. Flashes of light in the dark, a smile on a troubled day, a breeze in the height of summer. Gandalf was as the sun to the beings of Middle-earth. And as we said in an earlier profile of Gandalf, he is like the sun in many ways. First and foremost, the glimpse of it is a promise kept, the promise of tomorrow, of better times to come, the ultimate promise that good will be triumphant in the end. Gandalf's ability to inspire is not constrained to Middle-earth, as it is certain that Gandalf has inspired many millions of people. Our community is one brought together by the love for this world and its character, out of respect and admiration for Professor Tolkien, and it's important to bring this up. If Gandalf or any other Tolkien character has ever personally inspired you, please tell us in the comments below. If Tolkien ever inspired you to pick up a pen and pad and to write your own fantastical stories, tell us about that too. Gandalf is one of inspiration, and this is what we want to share today. Gandalf has played more than a passing role in many of our lives, as an inspiration to us and to so many others. We would advise you to consider that, for Gandalf, power and strength are not the same. Power is a gross abuse of strength, and at times it requires more strength to walk away from a fight, more wisdom to avoid some battles and take on what you can when you are able. And as always, there is always hope.
Just a fool's hope.
With that now though, it is time for my question of the day, which is, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of Gandalf? His fireworks? His power? His incredible ships of smoke? Let me know your thoughts and opinions on this in the comment section below. And now to shout out our patrons. You guys have been incredible in supporting our short film, and we cannot thank you enough. We have the Divine Power tier members of Kevin and Abram, the Fire Demon tier members of Nashith and Gregory, and the Wizard Staff tier members of John, Andrew, Jennifer, Hunter, and David too. Every single one of you is a true legend of the Brohirrim. Finally, if you have managed to reach the end of the video with me today and you are enjoying what you see on the channel, please hit that subscribe button with the bell icon too, so that you can be notified of all future uploads. And so, thank you for spending just some of your time with me today, and I will see you next time on The Broken Sword.